They said he was insane, building a home inside solid rock while everyone else lived in proper houses. But when the storm came, only one structure in the entire town survived. And the man they mocked? He became the only reason 27 people didn't freeze to death. This is his story. February 9th, 1884, 3:17 p.m. The wind didn't whisper, it screamed. One moment, the mining town of Providence, Colorado, sat under a gray winter sky. The next, it was being ripped apart by a wall of ice moving at 70 miles per hour. The temperature? It dropped 40 degrees in 15 minutes. Inside the finest timber homes, families huddled around their stoves, burning furniture just to stay warm. Outside, the world had turned into a horizontal nightmare of white chaos. But 2 miles north, inside a granite mountain, a man sat reading by lamplight. His thermometer read 52 degrees, steady, unchanged. His name was Silas Garrett, and for 2 years the entire town had called him a fool. But here's what they didn't know. And if you want to hear more incredible true stories like this one, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You won't regret it.
2 years earlier, spring 1882. Silas Garrett walked into the land office with $300 in his pocket, every cent earned through 15 years of backbreaking work in the silver mines. He wasn't there to buy farmland. He wasn't there to buy a town lot. He pointed to a section of map that made Mayor Hutchkins laugh out loud. A sheer granite cliff, 200 feet of solid rock facing south, completely worthless. "Son," the mayor chuckled, "you can't build a cabin on a vertical wall." "I don't plan to build on it," Silas replied quietly. "I plan to build in it." The room went silent. Then the laughter started. See, Silas wasn't your typical miner. He'd spent 15 years learning something nobody else cared about, the language of rock itself. He'd worked as a surveyor, a timberman, a junior engineer. He'd seen how mine shafts 50 feet underground stayed at a constant 54 degrees year-round, no matter what the weather did above. He'd watched timber beams thick as a man's waist snap like toothpicks under mountain pressure, while the granite stood eternal, unmoved. He understood something the town didn't. The earth itself was the perfect insulator. But when he tried to explain this to the mayor, laying out detailed engineering drawings showing a main chamber, ventilation system, and stable for his horse, the response was brutal. "It's 1882, son. We build civilized homes now. We're not cavemen." The mayor sold him the 40 acres for $10, a pittance, because everyone knew it was worthless. By sunset, the whole town knew. The quiet orphan boy had finally lost his mind.
The mockery began. What happened next was relentless. Martin Fletcher, the richest rancher in the county, made it his personal mission to humiliate Silas. Fletcher had just built a massive 2-story house for $4,000. The idea of someone choosing to live in a hole was an insult to everything he stood for. "Hey, Garrett," he'd yell from horseback, "joining the prairie dogs, are we?" The name stuck. The Badger. The town started calling his project Garrett's Folly. Even the school teacher used him as a cautionary tale. She told her students that Silas represented regression, a step backward into darkness. The town doctor warned him publicly that living in a damp cave would give him consumption and rheumatism. Silas tried to explain the ventilation system, the non-porous granite, the passive solar heating from the south-facing entrance. Nobody listened. They'd made up their minds, and in Providence, Colorado, doing something unnecessarily complicated became known as pulling a Garrett. But Silas didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just worked. The work. For 2 years, Silas labored in silence. Every morning before sunrise, the sound of steel on rock echoed across the valley. Drill, measure, small, precise dynamite charges, clear the rubble, repeat. His horse, Copper, became his only companion. She'd drag sleds loaded with broken granite out of the growing cavern, and Silas would carefully arrange each stone into retaining walls near the creek. Nothing was wasted. Every piece had a purpose.
Townspeople would ride out on Sundays like it was entertainment. They'd watch this solitary man, stripped to the waist in summer heat, muscles lean and covered in rock dust, engaged in what they considered pointless insanity. He never acknowledged their jeers, never looked up, just worked. He was meticulous. He kept a journal. Advanced main chamber 2 feet. Copper hauled 3 tons of rubble. Total depth now 18 feet. He didn't leave the walls rough. He spent 4 months smoothing them by hand, because smooth walls wouldn't trap moisture and would reflect light evenly. He carved niches for shelves, a sleeping platform, a workbench. He built Copper a stable with sloped drainage floors and a manger carved from living stone. The total cost for materials? $187. That included dynamite, tools, timber framing, and a cast-iron stove. Martin Fletcher spent more than that on glass for his parlor windows. By fall of 1883, it was complete. Silas moved in his few possessions, a cot, a table, 2 chairs, his geology books, and his father's rifle. That was it. In the saloon, men placed bets on how long he'd last. The consensus was 1 winter, 1 bad storm, and he'd be begging for a room at the boarding house. But that first winter was mild, and Silas thrived. While his neighbors burned through 5 or 6 cords of wood trying to heat their drafty cabins, Silas burned less than 1 cord the entire season. In summer of '83, when temperatures hit the high 90s and the town sweltered, inside Garrett's dwelling it never rose above 65 degrees. His quiet success was somehow more irritating than his perceived madness. The mockery faded. It wasn't fun anymore when he was clearly comfortable. As Silas would say to Copper while grooming her in the cool stone stable, "Time will tell." Speaking of time, if you're enjoying this story of quiet perseverance against the odds, show some love with a like. It really helps others discover these forgotten tales. And time was about to deliver a brutal verdict. The warning signs. February 8th, 1884. The air changed. Silas noticed it immediately. A heavy, metallic scent. The birds vanished completely. A herd of elk came down from the high country, moving with desperate urgency he'd never seen before. That evening, his barometer plunged. He tapped it. The needle didn't move. Not a malfunction, a warning. He spent the next day preparing. Extra hay for Copper. All his winter wood moved just inside the entrance. Gaps in the doors sealed with oiled canvas. 4 barrels filled with fresh creek water. He considered riding to town to warn them, but he knew exactly how it would go. The mad caveman predicting doom. They'd laugh him out of the saloon. He thought, being called crazy is a small price for being alive, but maybe it's too high a price for trying to save people who call you crazy. So he stayed. He checked his supplies one final time, and he waited. The White Death. When it hit, it was biblical. The blizzard didn't fall from the sky. It flew horizontally, a scouring wall of ice crystals moving 70 miles per hour. Visibility dropped to arm's length, then to 0. The sound was a continuous roar like 1,000 freight trains passing at once. It didn't just cover the world, it erased it. In Providence, those fine timber homes became death traps.
The wind forced snow through every crack. Families huddled around stoves, feeding them constantly, but the heat was ripped away as fast as it was generated. Martin Fletcher's grand $4,000 house with all those beautiful windows, it became an icebox. He burned through a month's worth of wood in 2 days just to keep his family from freezing. On day 4, the first roof collapsed. Thomas Brennan, the store owner, heard his timbers groan, then a deafening crack. 12 feet of compacted snow plunged through his roof, extinguishing his fire and burying his furniture. He and his family barely escaped to a back room. Chimneys became blocked with ice, houses filled with smoke, doors froze shut or were buried under drifts that reached the eaves. Providence, Colorado was being dismantled house by house. And 2 miles north, inside the mountain, Silas Garrett sat reading by lantern light. The temperature inside never dropped below 50 degrees, even when the fire was out. The roar of the blizzard was a distant, muffled hum. He tended to copper, ate his simple meals, used 2 logs a day, one for morning coffee, one for evening stew. He was safe, he was warm, and as he'd always been, alone. But not for long. The knock. Evening of day 5. It wasn't a knock, it was frantic, desperate pounding. Silas opened the heavy door to a blast of Arctic air and a figure so caked in ice it was barely human.
Dr. Harrison Webb, the same man who'd publicly warned that living in a cave would kill him. He collapsed into the entryway, gasping. "My wife," he choked out. "Pneumonia. Our fire's almost out. We've burned the furniture. We'll freeze before morning. Please." Silas didn't hesitate. No lecture, no "I told you so." He sat the doctor by the stove, gave him hot coffee, then put on his heaviest coat, grabbed a rope, and followed him back into the maelstrom. It took them an hour to travel 200 yards. They half-carried the doctor's delirious wife back to the dwelling, a sanctuary of warmth and stillness in the heart of howling chaos. They were the first. They weren't the last. Word spread on the wind itself. The next morning, Thomas Brennan and his family, faces frostbitten, eyes wide with disbelief. They'd seen the faint wisp of smoke from Silas's chimney, the only one in the entire area not blocked by snow. By day 7, the procession was constant. One by one, family by family, they came. The very people who had mocked him, called him a badger and a fool, now fought through the blizzard to the door of his folly. They arrived half-frozen, humbled, their pride scoured away by brutal wind. And Silas welcomed them all. He shared his food, his water, his warmth, never once mentioning their past ridicule. There was no room for gloating, only survival. The main chamber became a makeshift infirmary and dormitory. 27 souls, plus 1 horse, sheltered within the mountain's embrace. The last to arrive was Mayor Hutchkins. With him was Martin Fletcher. The roof on Fletcher's magnificent ranch house had finally given way under the weight of snow, smashing it like a child's toy. They'd barely escaped with their lives.
The mayor stood in the center of the chamber, looking at the faces of his townspeople. Safe, warm, alive. Then at Silas. "We called your work a folly," the mayor said, his voice cracking. "This folly has saved 27 lives." Silas simply nodded and handed him a blanket. "That doesn't matter now. You're safe. That's what matters." After the storm. The blizzard raged for 9 days total. When it finally broke, the silence was shocking. The survivors emerged into an alien landscape of white sculptures. The devastation in Providence was absolute. 14 people dead, dozens more with severe frostbite. Of the 80 structures in town, more than half were damaged beyond repair. A week later, Mayor Hutchkins called a town meeting in the shell of the ruined church. He asked Silas Garrett to stand before the assembled survivors. "I owe you an apology," Hutchkins said, his voice clear. "We all do. I called you uncivilized for wanting to live in a rock. I was wrong. We built our homes with pride, and the wind took them.
You built yours with wisdom, and it sheltered us. I called you foolish, but you were the only one who built for the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. You were right. God help me, you were right." Martin Fletcher stood up. "My ranch is gone, but I have money in the bank in Denver. I'll pay to have more of these shelters built for anyone who needs one." He turned to Silas. "If you'll teach us." Silas Garrett, the orphan boy, the badger, the fool, stood before them and simply said, "Of course." The legacy. The next year, the hillsides around Providence began to change. Using Silas's techniques and Fletcher's funding, families began carving new dwellings into the rock. Not emergency shelters, primary homes.
Dr. Webb documented every method and sent detailed letters to engineers at the Colorado School of Mines. The principles of geothermal construction, understood by ancient peoples for thousands of years, were rediscovered. By winter of 1886, 11 families lived in homes carved from stone. The term "pulling a garret" was still used, but now it meant doing something with uncommon foresight and intelligence. Silas lived in his dwelling for the rest of his life. He never married, but he was never again alone. He became the town's most respected elder. He died peacefully in his sleep in 1918 at age 69. The entire town and people from 3 counties attended his funeral. He was buried on the bluff above his home, a simple stone marker overlooking the valley. Today, Garrett's dwelling is a protected historical site. Engineers and architects still visit to study the elegant simplicity of his design. At the entrance, bolted to the heavy timber frame he installed over a century ago, is a bronze plaque placed there in 1920 by the townspeople he saved. It reads, "Silas Garrett, mocked as madness, proven as wisdom. When civilization faltered, the mountain endured. He taught us that the strongest shelter is not built against nature, but within it. In this rock, he saved 27 souls and the future of our town. Beside him stood his faithful horse, Copper, the first life saved by this sanctuary." Thanks for watching this story of the man who chose wisdom over pride. If it resonated with you, drop a like and let me know in the comments what lesson hit you hardest. And if you want more forgotten tales of extraordinary people, check out the video I've linked on screen. I think you'll love it. The rock still stands, as rocks do. The wind still scours the high plains in winter. And the lesson remains, carved not just into the granite of the mountain, but into the memory of the people. Preparation is not paranoia. It is the highest form of respect for a world that is older, stronger, and far less forgiving than human pride.